8 early signs of vascular dementia most people miss. Most people miss number 5. You brush it off at first. Misplaced keys, a forgotten parking spot, the same question asked twice, then 3 times. You tell yourself, this is just part of getting older. Most people do. But what if these small moments aren't aging at all? What if they're early warning signs of something your doctor can still help slow down if caught in time? Vascular dementia is the second most common form of dementia in adults over 60. It affects millions of families, often quietly, gradually, and without warning. What's most troubling isn't the disease itself, it's how long it goes unrecognized. Many families miss the earliest signs for years. By the time they seek medical help, irreversible brain damage has already taken place. In this video, I'll walk you through 8 early signs of vascular dementia that older adults and caregivers must know. Sign number 3 is especially dangerous because it feels so ordinary that even spouses living together often overlook it. Once you understand these signs, you'll never see normal aging the same way again.
Before we begin, I need to be very clear. This video is for educational awareness only. If you or someone you love shows any of these signs, you must speak with a doctor immediately. Only a qualified medical professional can diagnose vascular dementia. These signs do not confirm a diagnosis, but they do mean medical evaluation is urgently needed. Now, let's begin. Sign 1. Increased confusion or disorientation at night. Doctors have a name for this pattern. They call it Sundowning. And it often begins so quietly that families don't recognize it at first. During the daytime, your loved one may seem completely normal. They hold conversations, they recognize faces, they manage routine tasks without difficulty. But as evening approaches, something changes. They begin asking what day it is. They forget whether they've already eaten dinner. They may insist they need to go home, even while sitting in their own living room. Some become restless. Others grow anxious or unusually suspicious. A few may pace the house or repeatedly check doors and windows. Families often say they're just tired. They didn't sleep well. It's probably stress. But this is not normal tiredness. Sundowning happens because the brain is already under strain. In vascular dementia, damaged blood vessels reduce the brain's ability to receive oxygen and nutrients efficiently. As the day goes on, the brain becomes fatigued, and by evening, it struggles to compensate. Reduced lighting makes things worse. Shadows appear unfamiliar. Rooms look different. Visual cues that normally help with orientation, clocks, windows, daylight, begin to fade. For a vulnerable brain, this loss of structure can trigger confusion, fear, and disorientation. Your loved one isn't being difficult. They aren't imagining things. Their brain is working harder than it should and failing to keep up. One of the most painful aspects of sundowning is how inconsistent it can appear. Some evenings are calm, others feel chaotic. This inconsistency causes families to doubt their instincts. They wait, they hope it passes. But when evening confusion becomes frequent or predictable, it is a warning sign that should not be ignored. Especially if it happens several times a week, at roughly the same time each evening, or alongside other changes in memory or behavior. This pattern deserves medical evaluation. One of the most helpful things families can do is document what they see. You don't need anything complicated. For 2 weeks, keep a simple diary and note what time the confusion begins, how long it lasts, what behaviors appear, what seems to make it worse or better. Does it start after sunset? After a busy day? After missing a meal? This information gives doctors something incredibly valuable,
a real-world picture of how the brain is functioning outside the clinic. Early recognition matters. While vascular dementia cannot be reversed, early treatment can sometimes slow progression, reduce distress, and improve daily quality of life. Most importantly, it helps families understand what is happening and respond with patience instead of fear or frustration. If evening confusion is becoming part of your routine, don't dismiss it. Pay attention, write it down, and speak with a medical professional. This is one of the earliest signs many families miss. Next, we'll discuss sign 2, a change that often looks like personality or mood, but actually signals something much deeper.
Sign number 2. Trouble finding common words. Everyone forgets a word now and then. It happens to all of us. A name sits on the tip of the tongue. A word comes back a moment later. But what we're talking about here is different. The person begins speaking clearly. Their sentence has direction, and then suddenly it stops. They pause. They search. You can see the effort on their face. They know exactly what they want to say, but the word itself is gone. So they substitute. The cold food box instead of refrigerator. That thing you eat with instead of fork. The place you sleep instead of bedroom. At first, it sounds almost harmless, even a little humorous. But when this happens repeatedly, sometimes several times in a single conversation, it signals something deeper. In vascular dementia, word-finding problems often appear suddenly. One day, speech is smooth and confident. The next day, familiar words feel unreachable. This uneven pattern is important. Unlike normal aging, where language slowly and gradually declines, vascular-related language problems can fluctuate dramatically, depending on blood flow to specific areas of the brain. Some days the brain compensates, other days it can't. This inconsistency confuses families. They wonder, how can they speak so well yesterday and struggle today? That question itself is a clue. Over time, many people become aware of these lapses, and that awareness is painful. They feel embarrassed, frustrated, afraid of sounding foolish. So they begin to speak less. They avoid phone calls. They stop telling stories. They let others do the talking. Families often interpret this as depression or social withdrawal or a loss of interest, but in many cases it's neither. It's self-protection. The person is trying to avoid the stress of searching for words that no longer come easily. How you respond in these moments matters. If you notice these pauses, don't interrupt, don't rush, and don't finish their sentences. Even when your intention is kindness, interruption can increase anxiety and shut communication down completely. Instead, give them time. Maintain eye contact. Let the silence exist, and quietly take note of what you're seeing. Pay attention to how often word-finding problems occur, whether they appear suddenly or fluctuate day to day, whether the person is beginning to avoid conversation. Write these observations down. Doctors rely heavily on patterns described by family members because short clinic visits rarely capture these changes. Early evaluation doesn't just help with diagnosis, it helps preserve dignity. When people feel understood instead of rushed, they stay engaged longer. This sign is often overlooked, but when it appears alongside other changes, it deserves medical attention. Next, we'll talk about sign number 3, the one so subtle that even people living together often miss it completely.
Sign number 3. Difficulty following conversations or TV shows. This sign is easy to miss, and that's what makes it so dangerous. Your father sits down to watch his favorite television show, the same one he's followed for years.
The characters are familiar, the storyline isn't complicated. And yet, something feels off. A few minutes in, he asks, "Who is that?" You explain. Not long after, he asks, "Why are they doing that?" You explain again. Then, just minutes later, "What just happened?" At first, it's frustrating. You wonder if he's distracted, if he wasn't really paying attention. But this is not a hearing problem, and it's not a lack of interest. What you're seeing is a breakdown in working memory. Working memory is the brain's ability to hold information briefly, just long enough to understand what's happening and connect one idea to the next. It allows us to follow a storyline, keep track of who's speaking, understand cause and effect, stay oriented in conversation. When blood flow to key brain areas is impaired, as it often is in vascular dementia, this system begins to fail. The brain receives the information, but it can't hold on to it. So explanations fade almost immediately. This makes everyday situations exhausting. Conversations move too quickly. Multiple voices blur together. New information piles up before the previous thought has settled. Family gatherings become overwhelming. The person may sit quietly in the corner. They may nod politely without responding. They may leave the room entirely. From the outside, it looks like disinterest, withdrawal, antisocial behavior. But it's none of those things. It's cognitive overload. The brain is working harder than it should and still falling behind. Many people recognize this change in themselves. They feel embarrassed asking the same questions. They sense the impatience in others, so they stop asking. They retreat. This is often the moment families say, "He's just not social anymore." But what's really happening is self-preservation. The person is protecting themselves from confusion and humiliation. This sign is especially important because it often appears before obvious memory loss. Someone may still remember names, faces, and routines, yet struggle to follow a simple plot or conversation. That mismatch is a clue. If you notice this pattern, repeated questions within minutes, difficulty following familiar TV shows, trouble staying engaged in group conversations, don't ignore it. And don't test them. Avoid saying, "I already told you," or "You just asked that." Instead, slow things down. Speak one idea at a time. Use short sentences. Offer reassurance rather than correction. And most importantly, document what you're seeing. Write down when these difficulties occur, what situations trigger them, whether they're becoming more frequent. Doctors depend on this information. Early medical evaluation can identify vascular causes that may still be treated or managed, potentially preventing further damage. This sign is subtle. It's often mistaken for personality change, but it's one of the clearest neurological warnings when you know how to see it. Next, we'll discuss sign number 4, a change that often looks like clumsiness or carelessness, but may actually reflect damage in the brain's control centers. Sign number 4, problems with depth perception and spatial awareness. This sign often appears in ways that seem minor at first, so minor that families rarely connect them to the brain. But once you know what to look for, the pattern becomes clear. Your loved one begins to misjudge steps or curbs. They hesitate at the edge of a sidewalk. They stumble going down stairs they've used for years. They bump into door frames, brush against furniture, or knock over objects that never used to be a problem. A glass is placed on the table but misses the surface. A drink spills. A plate tips. At first, everyone laughs it off. They're just clumsy today. Maybe they weren't paying attention. But this isn't carelessness, and it's not a vision problem. In many cases, the eyes are working just fine. What's failing is the brain's ability to interpret space and distance. Depth perception and spatial awareness depend on several areas of the brain working together, processing visual input, body position, and movement in real time. In vascular dementia, reduced blood flow disrupts these networks. The result is a world that suddenly feels misaligned. Steps look closer or farther than they really are. Objects appear where the brain expects them to be, not where they actually are. This dramatically increases the risk of falls, and falls are one of the most serious threats to older adults, often leading to fractures, hospitalizations, and loss of independence. Driving also becomes dangerous. Parking the car becomes difficult, distances are misjudged, curbs are clipped, scratches appear on bumpers or mirrors. What makes this sign especially concerning is that the person often doesn't realize anything is wrong. They may blame the environment, the lighting, the stairs, the car. They rarely suspect their own perception has changed. This lack of awareness is itself a neurological warning sign. If you notice increased clumsiness, frequent minor accidents, new difficulty with stairs, doorways, or parking, do not ignore it. These are not random mishaps, they are clues, and they often appear before more obvious memory problems. At this stage, intervention can be critical, not only for brain health, but for physical safety. Remove tripping hazards, improve lighting, consider limiting driving until medical evaluation is completed. Most importantly, document what you see. Write down when these incidents happen, what situations trigger them, whether they're becoming more frequent. Doctors take these observations seriously because when the brain can no longer judge space correctly, it's telling you something important. Next, we'll discuss sign number 5, a change many families mistake for stubbornness or personality, but which often reflects impaired brain control over planning and judgment.
Sign number 5. Subtle changes in walking or balance. This is the sign almost everyone misses, not because it's rare, but because it looks so ordinary. The person doesn't fall, they don't complain, they don't even mention it. But if you watch closely, something has changed. Their steps are shorter, their walking is slower than it used to be. There's a slight shuffle, almost imperceptible. They hesitate before stepping off a curb. They pause at doorways. They seem unsteady when turning around or changing direction. Families usually explain it away. Arthritis, stiff joints, just getting older. But walking is not just a physical action. Walking requires complex coordination between multiple areas of the brain, areas responsible for balance, timing, planning, and spatial awareness. In vascular dementia, tiny strokes, sometimes so small they go unnoticed, can damage these networks. And when that happens, movement changes appear years before obvious memory loss. This is why this sign is so important. The person may still remember names, they may still hold conversations, they may still manage daily routines, but their gait, the way they walk, has quietly changed. One of the most telling clues is what happens when the person tries to do two things at once. Watch what happens when they walk and talk. When they're distracted by conversation, when they're thinking, when they're answering a question, their walking may slow dramatically. They may stop mid-step. They may lose balance or become visibly unsteady. This is called dual task difficulty. In a healthy brain, walking is automatic. In a damaged brain, walking requires conscious effort. When attention is divided, movement suffers. This is a major neurological red flag, and it's not something that improves on its own. If you notice new shuffling, shortened steps, hesitation or instability, or worsening balance during distraction, especially when these changes appear alongside confusion, word-finding trouble, or difficulty following conversations, medical evaluation is urgent. Not later, not we'll watch it for a few months.
Early intervention may help prevent further strokes, reduce fall risk, and protect independence. This sign is quiet. It doesn't demand attention, but it's one of the clearest warnings the brain gives when blood flow is compromised. Pay attention to how they walk, because sometimes the feet reveal what the memory hasn't yet. Next, we'll look at the following sign, one that often appears as mood or behavior change, but is actually rooted deep in the brain's control centers.
Sign number 6. Sudden emotional changes or loss of control. This sign can be one of the most confusing and painful for families. A calm, gentle person suddenly becomes angry. Someone who was always emotionally reserved begins crying over small things. The reactions seem out of character, unexpected, sometimes shocking. And families often ask, why are they acting like this? These are not personality changes. They are neurological symptoms. In vascular dementia, damage to specific areas of the brain interferes with emotional regulation, the system that helps us filter, control, and balance our feelings. When that system is disrupted, emotions may become stronger than the situation calls for, inappropriate to the moment, or difficult to stop once they begin. Anger may flare suddenly and fade just as quickly. Tears may come without warning or clear reason. Frustration may turn into emotional outbursts. This is not intentional behavior, and it is not something that can be talked through or reasoned away. Families often take these reactions personally. They try to calm, explain, or correct the emotion. But this is not an emotional problem, it is a medical one. The brain's ability to regulate emotion has been compromised. What matters most is when these changes appear. If emotional shifts appear suddenly, are dramatically different from the person's lifelong temperament, or occur alongside memory, speech, balance, or attention problems, medical evaluation is needed immediately. Early assessment can help identify treatable vascular causes and guide families in responding with understanding rather than frustration. The most important thing to remember is this: the person isn't choosing these reactions, they're experiencing them. And recognizing this sign early can spare everyone unnecessary pain. Next, we'll look at another early warning sign, one that often looks like stubbornness or poor judgment, but actually signals damage in the brain's decision-making centers.
Sign number 8. Sudden urinary urgency without infection. This sign surprises almost everyone. Sudden bladder urgency appears out of nowhere. There's no infection, no pain, no clear prostate problem, yet the person feels an overwhelming need to urinate with very little warning. Doctors often attribute this to aging. Families assume it's just another inconvenience of getting older. But this can be an early neurological sign. The bladder is not controlled only by muscles, it's controlled by the brain. Specific brain pathways regulate when the bladder should hold and when it should release. In vascular dementia, damage to small blood vessels can disrupt these pathways. When that happens, the signal becomes urgent and poorly controlled. The result is sudden urgency, frequent bathroom trips, or occasional accidents, even in someone who previously had no bladder issues. What makes this sign especially easy to miss is that it rarely appears alone. It often shows up alongside other subtle changes: slower walking, balance issues, trouble focusing, word-finding difficulty. Individually, each symptom seems unrelated. Together, they tell a neurological story. Unfortunately, this connection is often overlooked, even in medical settings. That's why families must speak up. If urinary changes appear suddenly, cannot be explained by infection or urological causes, and occur alongside cognitive or movement changes, you should insist on a neurological evaluation. This is not about embarrassment, it's about early detection.
Recognizing this sign early can help doctors identify vascular causes that may still be treated, potentially slowing progression and preventing further damage. This symptom is easy to dismiss, but in the context of other changes, it deserves attention. Pay attention to patterns, trust your instincts, and don't accept it's just aging without a thorough evaluation. Next, we'll look at another early sign, one that often hides in plain sight, but reveals how the brain is truly functioning.
What you must do next. If you recognize more than one of these signs, the most important thing you can do is take action, calmly and deliberately. Start by documenting everything. Write down when the symptoms first appeared, how often they occur, whether they're getting worse, what seems to trigger or intensify them. These notes may feel simple, but they are powerful. They give doctors insight that a short office visit often can't. Next, schedule a medical appointment as soon as possible. Bring your notes with you. Be specific. Don't minimize what you've observed. If necessary, ask directly for a comprehensive evaluation. This may include cognitive testing, brain imaging, and a careful assessment of vascular health. These tests are not about labeling or fear. They are about understanding what's happening while there is still time to act. Finally, focus on protecting vascular health right now. The brain depends on healthy blood flow. That means keeping blood pressure under control, managing diabetes carefully, staying physically active within safe limits, eating heart-healthy foods, and stopping smoking if applicable. These steps matter at every stage. Vascular dementia is not something families cause, but early awareness can change the course. The goal is not panic. The goal is clarity, because the earlier vascular problems are identified, the more options remain on the table. Pay attention, trust what you're seeing, and don't delay seeking medical guidance. Your attention today could make a meaningful difference tomorrow.
Vascular dementia is different from Alzheimer's. Because its cause is related to blood vessels, early treatment can slow or even prevent further brain damage. Recognizing these signs early can protect a person's independence, dignity, and quality of life. Now, I want to hear from you. Which sign surprised you the most? Have you noticed any of these changes in someone you love? Please share your thoughts in the comments below. Your experience might help others facing the same challenges. If this video was helpful to you, please like, subscribe, and share it. We create evidence-based health content specifically for people over 60 and their families, because knowledge is power, but only if you act on it. Thank you for watching.